Hello, this is K1 and this is Kerbal Space Program. And this is KerbalOdyssey, my continuing video series on the history of spaceflight. And this is part 5 of What If We Did Not Abandon Skylab. After much deliberation and much testing and much trial and error, I have finally found the proper vehicle with which to get our Salyut station into orbit and docked with our Skylab station. And this is very appropriate because this is, at least my interpretation, of the Delta IV Heavy rocket. Now this is not a mod depicting Delta IV, rather my impression of it using actual Kerbal parts, but I think it fits the bill pretty well. And it is appropriate because as of tomorrow morning, NASA will launch its first test flight of their Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle in the unmanned flight of EFT-1, Exploratory Flight Test 1, using the Delta IV Heavy. And let's get her up. Now the Delta IV Heavy is not designed as a man-rated booster. It is mostly for sending large cargo modules and anything that needs a lot of power to lift it up, but not actually have men inside it. So when Orion actually starts flying manned, they have what they refer to as SLS, Space Launch System. But the development of that booster is still underway and not completed yet. So by using the Delta IV Heavy, they can get a little ahead on their flight plan and testing while SLS is still under development. So I think that's actually a fairly smart idea. And it helps to uncover any potential problems now and start working on them before getting too deep into development and having to wait. So as for the flight of EFT-1, it is actually a fairly simple test flight. The unmanned Orion vehicle will launch into orbit and complete one low Earth orbit of the Earth. Earth orbit of the Earth. A little redundant, I apologize. But after the completed orbit, it will fire its service module engine and make an extended elliptical orbit of about 3,600 miles. We're about ready to stage here. There they go. Losing a little bit of velocity, but not too bad. So by extending out to 3,600 miles, it will reach through the more dense layers of the Van Allen radiation belts. And this is to test the new spacecraft, new fabrication technologies, new computer systems, and test it all against the strongest radiation in Earth orbit that a ship will pass through. And after completing this test, it will make its descent from that altitude and enter the Earth's atmosphere at a high enough velocity, I believe a 25,000 miles per hour rather than the standard orbital velocity of 17,000, which is about the velocity a returning vehicle from Mars or an asteroid or even the Moon would be at. So this would also test the heat shield under extremes that spacecraft don't normally encounter. So let's set as a target. I think for the first time we're gonna pull ahead of Skylab, but we'll see. And it's actually working quite efficiently here. Now as for the purpose of Orion, it follows much the same principles as the proposed Constellation craft has. It was just given a different name when a newer budget came out. Oh, we're going to get a very good Okay, undershot that just a bit, but a separation of 14 kilometers. That's pretty good for an unplanned direct descent rendezvous. So basically Constellation plus 5 years. And the original plan for Constellation was to return to the moon and hopefully push on to Mars. And about the same flight plan is intended for Orion. The plans for the moon are still up for grabs. They're tossing back and forth between landing on its surface or capturing a small asteroid and studying it in lunar orbit. Like using an unmanned craft to capture the small asteroid and bring it into lunar orbit. And after that, sending a manned mission to study it. And there are merits in both plans. But for sentimental value alone, I think, and pure study as well, I personally almost find the lunar landing mission is preferable, if only to show the world that we did indeed land there. I mean, I don't know what other proof they need. We've given all debated proofs till doomsday, and they still won't believe it, but still. Alright, let's keep our eye on this. I don't want to exceed the atmosphere with my booster. I could always catch up to the station later. Let's cut our velocity a bit. Keep that below 50, about 40 will do it. Separate our shroud, disengage, and fire the station's own engines. And this is a Russian Salyut station. I suppose we could say Soviet, because all of the Salyut modules were created and flown while the Soviet Union still existed. So it is still appropriate in that manner. And unlike Skylab, each Salyut station had its own propulsion. And let's get that velocity down before we kill it. And before we approach the station, let's get our solar panels extended. Now I chose this particular Salyut, being Salyut 7, just because I like its panels. They're just big and wide. And unlike Salyut 1 through 4, rather, don't include 2, 3, and 5 because they weren't actually Salyut, but unlike the other station modules, this one has 2 docking ports, one on the front and one on the back. So that gives it a little extra variability. Now I mentioned the other Salyut stations were not Salyut. Salyut 2, 3, and 5 were actually military Almaz stations. They just used the Salyut name to disguise their military nature. And this was, of course, during the Cold War. So things like that are bound to happen, of course. See if we can get our trajectory back up. I might have to do it manually here. Now, with regards to Salyut, unlike Skylab, which was a single station that had multiple crews, Salyut had instead multiple stations that had either 1, 2, maybe 3 crews. But most had only a singular crew. And sometimes this was by design, and other times it was simply because they did not have the capability to send another mission. And we're going to keep getting force separation here. Ah. And this all began with the very first Salyut, because Salyut 1 had an incredibly successful mission, but after the incredible stay aboard the station, the crew of Soyuz 11 did not return to Earth alive. A valve inside the Soyuz spacecraft had come open when the modules separated, and the atmosphere bled out, and the lives of all three men were unfortunately lost. So there was extensive redesigns needed to Soyuz, and during this time, Salyut 1 had suffered orbital decay before another mission could be sent to it. Salyut 2, which was actually the first Almaz, did reach orbit, but the third stage engine, or rather the third stage itself, the tank, had exploded and debris had impacted the station, tearing off a solar wing, puncturing the hull. Finally the hull ruptured and just led to the entire station disintegrating and being completely lost. And we see Skylab within 6 kilometers here. We're getting in close. And as the Salyut line completed, the final one being Salyut 7, the one I'm flying here, around 1982. After that, the remainder of the program was focused to a brand new venture of a large-scale station construction, and that would be Mir. And Mir was essentially built out of Salyut. The core module of Mir looked just like Salyut 7, minus 1 solar panel, just with a hub module with 5 extra ports on it. It was essentially Salyut 8. The official designation was DOS 7, because Salyut was DOS stations. But for all intents and purposes, the core module of Mir was Salyut 8. So the many Salyut stations had become the basis for what would become Mir, which itself would survive the collapse of the Soviet Union and be basically the first international space station before ISS. The plans at the time for America, and we can barely see our Skylab here because it's in the dark, so I'll turn our numbers back on. In the 1980s was to build Space Station Freedom, as it was called. But since the cost of this was not really feasible, and the Russians already had their station up, and could not really supply the logistics to maintain it after the Soviet Union collapsed, it was deemed to be more fiscally responsible for America to simply cooperate with Mir. And I may run out of propellant before I can complete rendezvous here. In fact, I have. Well, that is okay, because I have an alternative, and it is sitting right here. I'm going to have to say transfer Jeb. Actually, let's get Bob over here too. Ah, will you separate already? Undock. So let's send our Soyuz out to capture our Salyut. Where is it? There you are. And come to me, my new friend. Now, generally, you don't really see a station capture such as this being necessitated on a mission. They, of course, have mathematicians to plot out every single fuel expenditure and thrust that is needed. But, since we're flying by the seat of our pants in Kerbal, we will do things the fun way. In this case, I will dock onto the back port and just use the combined Soyuz Salyut to reach Skylab. It shouldn't be too far away. A little Sunday drive, as it were. Let's turn ourselves retrograde for the braking burn. Now, as we try and recapture our wayward station module, the Orion, as I mentioned, the moon and the asteroid, the ultimate goal of the program is in fact to send a manned mission to Mars. And to date, the intended goal of that is by 2030. Now, considering the moon program covered about 10 years of development, we have 15 to reach Mars. I think that's a pretty feasible goal. Not extraordinarily rushed and not unnecessarily long. If we get there sooner, all the better. Hello, Salyut. I see you're still called Delta 4 Heavy. We'll change that. Let's change our angle to chase mode so we can see what we're doing a little more accurately. I want that docking port in the back. Let's arrest our momentum away here. And get ourselves into position. Whoops. Auto. There we go. Once you learn how to use the nav ball to dock, it makes it so much easier. I actually did have a docking camera mod at one point, but I guess Kerbal stopped supporting it. But that's okay. Why use your eyeball when you can use instruments? And here we go. Nestling into the docking port. Kerklunk! Now let's stop moving away here. Okay. We have arrested the fall. Time to get back into position. Only 1.6 kilometers away. That could have been so much worse. Running out of fuel in space is bad, bad, bad. You might as well run out of oxygen, because then at least the end comes quickly. Let's get into rendezvous here, and rather than waste fuel, I'm just going to speed up time a little bit. Well, that's actually not going to work. Apparently my indicators are not wanting to function here. Set target. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but I can just adjust in the meantime. In fact, since we know the direction it's pushing us, I'll just do it that way. Wait for those indicators to reconnect, and then adjust again. And we're having our standard issue of rendezvousing on the nighttime side. I'm wasting a lot of fuel here, unfortunately, but if I could just get the station locked on, there's a little extra fuel there, and I can always send up a refueling module later. We're at 800 kilometers here, or 800 meters, not kilometers. Get ourselves turned around. Actually, no, that's not. I think the docking node we want is on this side, but I can't tell. But you know what? I know the best way to find out. Where are you? Oh goodness, well maybe it's not the best way to find out, because I have no idea where they are. I think down and away. Ah, there we are. Okay, so I am indeed on the wrong side, but I'll actually take the unusual step of turning Skylab itself to assist with our rendezvous. And Delta 4 Heavy is not moving in too extraordinarily fast. And arrest that motion. And then I can worry about angle and orientation as I approach. I'm going to want to start slowing down here in a minute. Gosh, look at all those jets firing. Is down at 2.5 meters per second. And speed up time here because it is an agonizingly slow approach. Get within 100 meters and slow down some more. Thankfully I had the foresight of putting a couple extra jets on the Salyut module. The unfortunate thing about the Salyuts is they don't have any braking thrust, so you have to fully bring them around. Wow, we're on the complete opposite end of the sun. So I have to maneuver in the dark. Now I can see our orientation, so I can at least bring Salyut to the proper angle. Because I want its two main panels tilted toward the sun, like the rest of Skylab. I'm going to have to turn here. A little too much. Okay, directly angled from it. Roughly. So we got our indicators and we are making our approach. Let's make sure we're lined up. We're a little bit off, but I can fix that. Darn it, I keep getting my attitude a little wrong. Alright. Darn it. Stop it. Okay. So we got stable that way. I can't really tell what my angle is, but I'm going to guesstimate it this way. I don't know why once again I forgot to put lights. Alright, that's about as close as we're going to get. Okay, let's get our heading indicator in the right spot. And bring it on in. Now this is going to make for a fairly long station already here. Although this will only be the second livable module. Although it is a large one. But beyond that, the historical implications of it are certainly noteworthy. I apologize if you can't really see what's going on here. We're fairly lined up. Let's go ahead and bring it in the rest of the way. Make sure everything is tilted properly. Roughly. and bring those docking ports together ever so slick. And here we go. We are about to make capture. 3, 2, 1, and catch it. Did I miss? I missed. Let's try this again. Sometimes occupying purely by instruments is not always the best choice, especially when the actual module is not the one you're controlling with. Control from here. There it goes. There it goes! And there we are! Oh my goodness. That was rough. But look at the size of that thing. And keep in mind, this part, Skylab itself was launched with a Saturn V. This was not. So that is where our main difference lie here. Now we're swinging just a little bit. I need to get these stations locked together and in a hurry. Let's link to you. And that's one. And without these docking struts, this whole thing would be so unsteady. And it's still tumbling even with them, but after I get a couple more locks on it, I can turn SAS back on. Oh boy. We're still a little earth. Still a little wibbly wobbly. So this is going to be a little bit of a chore to get this thing finally stabilized and connected. But I can do that on my own. We have the main part done. And as we approach into daylight here, speed up time just a little bit. Time speed up may have stabilized me, and that's kind of a cheat, but we have Salyut Skylab. And with these two modules together, the two prides of space station engineering for the United States and Russia, I'm going to officially rename to Space Station K1. And that is what she will remain for the duration. I will continue to make additions to it, but as for the sake of the video itself, we have pretty much concluded the historical aspect. I will soon send the crew of the Apollo home and send up another Soyuz, and we will see how far I can build this thing before it makes my computer crash. Thank you for joining me. This is K1, and this has been KerbalOdyssey. What if we did not abandon Skylab? And hopefully the next KerbalOdyssey will be another piece of space history. Thank you much for joining me. Good night.